It was a busy Saturday afternoon at the crowded Westwood Mall, and Karen was on a mission. Her phone was about to die, and she needed to find an available outlet to charge it, no matter what. Striding through the packed corridors, Karen scanned the area relentlessly, pushing past shoppers and ignoring their annoyed looks. Her eyes finally landed on a sign for the fire exit, and a wicked grin spread across her face. "Perfect," she muttered, quickly moving towards the heavy metal door. A small metal plate on the wall indicated an electrical outlet, and without hesitation, Karen pulled out her phone charger. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she wedged her oversized purse in the doorway, effectively blocking the exit. She then plugged in her phone and leaned back against the wall, a triumphant expression on her face as the battery began to charge. For the next 20 minutes, Karen scrolled through social media, completely oblivious to the alarmed looks from passersby. A few concerned shoppers even approached her, asking if she realized she was blocking a fire exit. But Karen simply waved them off with an annoyed huff. "I'm just charging my phone. It'll only be a few more minutes," she snapped, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Can't you see I'm busy?" One particularly persistent man refused to leave, insisting that Karen move her bag. "This is a safety hazard. What if there was an emergency and people needed to get out?" he exclaimed, his face flushed with frustration. Karen scoffed and glared at him, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently on her phone screen. "Well, there isn't an emergency right now, is there?" she retorted, her tone dripping with disdain. "Go bother someone else. I'm almost done." The man opened his mouth to argue further, but Karen cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Look, I said I'll move in a minute. Just leave me alone, okay?" Realizing he was getting nowhere, the man reluctantly backed away, muttering under his breath about entitled behavior. Karen simply rolled her eyes again and returned her attention to her phone, blissfully unaware of the potential danger she was causing. Little did she know, her selfish actions were about to have far-reaching consequences that would shake her world to the core. It wasn't long before Karen's obstruction of fire exit caught the attention of the mall's security team. A concerned shopper had reported the incident, and 2 burly guards quickly made their way to the scene. "Ma'am, you need to move your bag from the fire exit immediately," one of the guards commanded sternly, his arms crossed over his broad chest. Karen looked up from her phone, her forehead creasing in annoyance. "Excuse me? I'm just charging my phone. It'll only be a few more minutes. What's the big deal?" The other guard stepped forward, his expression hardening. "This is a serious safety violation, ma'am. You're blocking a fire exit, which is against the law. We need you to move your belongings right now." Bristling at their authoritative tone, Karen rose to her feet, her designer handbag dangling from her shoulder. "I don't understand why you're making such a fuss about this," she huffed, crossing her arms defiantly. "There's no emergency, and I'm almost done. Can't you just leave me alone?" The first guard shook his head firmly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we can't ignore this. You need to move your bag immediately, or we'll have to call the police." Karen's eyes widened in shock, and she opened her mouth to protest, but the guards weren't having it. They moved forward, intent on physically removing the obstruction if necessary. Realizing she was cornered, Karen let out an exasperated sigh and reluctantly began to drag her bag away from the fire exit. As she did so, a crowd of onlookers had begun to gather, drawn by the commotion. Karen shot them all a haughty glare, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "What are you all staring at?" she snapped, her voice dripping with indignation. "Mind your own business." Once the exit was clear, the guards escorted Karen to a nearby security office, where they proceeded to lecture her on the importance of fire safety and the potential consequences of her actions. Karen listened, her arms crossed and her expression one of utter disdain. "This is so unfair," she muttered under her breath, her mind racing with thoughts of how she could turn the situation to her advantage. Little did she know, This was just the beginning of her troubles. After the confrontation with the mall security guards, Karen was fuming. She couldn't believe she had been treated like a common criminal for simply trying to charge her phone. In her mind, she had done nothing wrong, and the guards were overreacting. As she sat in the security office, her fingers tapping impatiently on the arm of the chair, Karen's mind raced with ways to get even. She couldn't let this go. It was a matter of principle. No one treated Karen this way and got away with it. "This is such a joke," she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing as she glared at the uniformed guards across the room. "I bet they were just power tripping. They had no right to manhandle me like that." One of the guards, a stern-looking man named Officer Ramirez, approached Karen and handed her a formal warning. "Ma'am, you need to understand the severity of your actions. Blocking a fire exit is a serious safety violation that could have endangered lives. We're letting you off with a warning this time, but if we catch you doing something like this again, you'll be facing criminal charges." Karen snatched the paper from his hand, her manicured nails nearly tearing it in half. "Whatever," she spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "I'm sure you're just looking for an excuse to harass innocent people. This is complete and utter bullshit." Officer Ramirez's expression hardened, and he leaned in closer, his voice low and stern. "Ma'am, I suggest you watch your tone and cooperate. You're already in enough trouble as it is. I'd hate to see you make it worse for yourself." Karen opened her mouth to retort, but the other guard, a younger woman named Officer Garcia, cut her off. "Karen, we're going to need you to leave the premises now. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." Realizing she was outnumbered and outmatched, Karen reluctantly stood up, her purse dangling from her shoulder. "Fine," she spat, glaring daggers at the guards. "But this isn't over. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." As Karen stormed out of the security office, her mind was racing with plans for revenge. She couldn't believe she had been treated this way, and she was determined to make the guards pay for their insolence. Little did she know, her actions were about to have far-reaching consequences that would shake her world to the core. As Karen stalked out of the mall, fuming with rage, she couldn't stop thinking about the injustice she had just experienced. How dare those security guards treat her like a common criminal? She was Karen, a well-known socialite and the daughter of a prominent businessman. She was used to getting her way, and this was unacceptable. Determined to get even, Karen immediately dialed her father's number, her manicured fingers shaking with anger as she waited for him to answer. "Daddy, you'll never believe what just happened to me at the mall," she exclaimed the moment he picked up. "Those security guards were so rude and disrespectful. They actually threatened to have me arrested just for charging my phone." Karen's father, a powerful and influential man, listened intently, his brow furrowing with concern. "That's outrageous, sweetheart," he said, his voice dripping with authority. "Don't worry, I'll make sure those guards pay for their insolence. No one treats my little girl that way and gets away with it." Hearing the determination in her father's voice, Karen felt a sense of relief wash over her. She knew that with his connections and resources, he would be able to make the guards' lives a living hell. "Thank you, Daddy," she said, her tone sickeningly sweet. "I knew I could count on you. Those security guards are going to regret the day they messed with Karen Livingston." Within hours, the mall's management had received a skate-in call from Karen's father, demanding the immediate termination of the 2 offending guards. He threatened legal action and a complete boycott of the mall if his demands were not met, and the terrified management wasted no time in complying. By the end of the day, both Officer Ramirez and Officer Garcia had been summarily fired, their reputations and careers in tatters. Karen, meanwhile, felt a sense of vindication wash over her. She had won, and she had done it in the most ruthless way possible. As she strutted through the mall, her head held high, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of power and control. She had shown those guards who was boss, and she relished the thought of them scrambling to find new jobs. It was a victory, and she was damn proud of it. Little did she know, however, that her actions were about to have far-reaching consequences that would shake her world to the core. In the aftermath of the incident at the mall, Karen was feeling on top of the world. She had flexed her family's wealth and influence, and the security guards who had dared to cross her were now paying the price. But little did Karen know, her actions were about to have far-reaching consequences that would shake her world to the core. As news of the guards' termination spread through the community, a wave of outrage began to build. People were appalled by the blatant abuse of power, and they quickly took to social media to voice their disgust. Unbelievable. Those guards were just doing their jobs, and some spoiled brat got them fired. One user wrote, "Their outrage palpable." This is a prime example of how the wealthy can buy their way out of accountability. Shameful, another commentator chimed in. The backlash was swift and unyielding, and soon, Karen's name was trending on platforms like Twitter and Facebook. Strangers from all walks of life were weighing in, condemning her actions and calling for her to be held accountable. At first, Karen was unperturbed by the online criticism. She had her father's money and influence to shield her, and she couldn't fathom that anything could truly damage her reputation. "These people are just jealous," she scoffed to her friends, dismissing the growing outrage with a wave of her hand. "They're just a bunch of nobodies who are mad that I got what I wanted." But as the days passed, the criticism only grew louder and more relentless. Karen's name was being dragged through the mud, and her carefully curated public image was starting to crumble. Suddenly, the once untouchable socialite found herself the target of intense public scrutiny. Businesses she had once frequented were now refusing to serve her, and her friends and acquaintances were distancing themselves, afraid of being associated with the pariah. Karen was devastated. She had never experienced anything like this before, and she had no idea how to handle it. Panic and desperation began to set in as she realized that her actions had consequences that she could no longer control. In a matter of days, Karen had gone from being the queen of the social scene to a punchline and a cautionary tale. And as she sat alone in her mansion, staring at the endless stream of hateful comments, she couldn't help but wonder if she had finally met her match. As the public outcry against Karen continued to grow, she found herself increasingly isolated and ostracized. Her once thriving social life had crumbled, and she struggled to come to terms with the consequences of her actions. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, Karen turned to her father, pleading with him to make the online backlash go away. But even his vast resources and influence seemed powerless against the relentless tide of public opinion. "Daddy, you have to do something," Karen cried, her voice laced with desperation. "These people are ruining my life. They won't leave me alone, and no one wants to be seen with me anymore." Her father, who had once been so eager to defend her, now seemed hesitant and unsure. "I'm not sure there's much I can do, sweetheart," he admitted, his voice uncharacteristically meek. "The public outrage is too widespread, and I don't want to risk further damage to our reputation." Karen's eyes widened in shock, and she felt a surge of betrayal. "What do you mean you can't do anything?" she shrieked. "You're supposed to protect me. I'm your daughter." Her father sighed heavily, his brow furrowed with worry. "I know, Karen, but this is different. You've really stepped in it this time, and I'm not sure you and I can make this go away. You're going to have to face the consequences of your actions." Hearing those words, Karen felt her world crumbling around her. She had always relied on her father's influence and resources to shield her from the consequences of her behavior, and the realization that he was unwilling to do so now was utterly devastating. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of her predicament, Karen retreated to her bedroom, where she locked herself away, refusing to face the outside world. She spent hours scrolling through the endless stream of criticism and hateful comments, her heart sinking with each new post. As the days turned into weeks, Karen's once vibrant spirit began to wither. She had become a prisoner in her own home, afraid to venture out and face the judgment and scorn of the public. The once untouchable socialite was now a pariah, a cautionary tale of the consequences of unchecked entitlement. It was a humbling and devastating experience, one that would forever change the way Karen viewed the world and her place in it. But as she sat alone in her room, staring at the empty walls, she couldn't help but wonder if it was too late to turn things around. As the weeks turned into months, the public scrutiny and backlash against Karen only continued to intensify. She had become a pariah, a symbol of the entitlement and privilege that so many people despised. Isolated and alone, Karen found herself grappling with a deep sense of shame and regret. The once confident and entitled socialite had been brought to her knees, forced to confront the consequences of her actions in a way she had never experienced before. Desperate to regain some semblance of control over her life, Karen began to explore ways to make amends and rebuild her tarnished reputation. She knew that simply hiding away in her mansion wouldn't make the problem go away, and she needed to find a way to take responsibility for her actions. After much soul-searching, Karen decided to reach out to the two security guards she had cost their jobs, Officer Ramirez and Officer Garcia. It was a humbling and difficult decision, but she knew it was the only way to begin the process of healing and redemption. Summoning her courage, Karen arranged a meeting with the guards, offering to make a public apology and provide them with financial compensation for their lost wages. She knew it was a long shot, but she was willing to do whatever it took to try and make things right. To her surprise, both Ramirez and Garcia were receptive to her overtures. They listened intently as Karen expressed her remorse and took responsibility for her actions, and they were struck by the genuine sincerity in her words. "I know that what I did was wrong, and I'm so sorry for the harm I've caused," Karen said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can't undo what's been done, but I hope that you'll allow me the chance to make amends." Ramirez and Garcia exchanged a meaningful glance, and after a moment of silence, they both nodded in agreement. "We appreciate your honesty and your willingness to take responsibility," Ramirez said, his tone measured but not unkind. "It's a start, and we're willing to give you a chance." As Karen walked away from the meeting, she felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. It was a small step, but it was a step in the right direction. She knew that the road to redemption would be long and arduous, but she was determined to see it through. With a renewed sense of purpose, Karen set out to rebuild her life and her reputation, one small step at a time. It wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face the challenge head-on. In the months that followed, Karen's journey towards redemption was arduous and filled with setbacks. The public's mistrust and disdain for her actions did not dissipate easily, and she found herself constantly having to prove her sincerity and commitment to making amends. But through it all, Karen persevered, determined to right the wrongs she had committed. She began by making a public apology, a heartfelt and humble statement that acknowledged the gravity of her actions and the harm she had caused. To her surprise, the apology was met with a cautious, but genuine, acceptance from some members of the community. Next, Karen set out to actively support fire safety and emergency preparedness initiatives, donating both time and resources to local organizations. She worked tirelessly to educate herself and others on the importance of fire safety, and she even went so far as to conduct training sessions for mall employees and security guards. Slowly but surely, Karen's actions began to speak louder than her past transgressions. The public, while still wary, began to take notice of her genuine efforts to make a difference. And as the months turned into years, Karen's reputation gradually began to mend, with more and more people willing to give her a second chance. One of the most meaningful moments in Karen's journey came when she was invited to a special ceremony honoring the two security guards she had once wronged, Officer Ramirez and Officer Garcia. The event was a testament to the power of forgiveness and redemption, and as Karen stood alongside the guards, she felt a sense of closure and healing that she had not experienced in a long time. "We're grateful for the work you've done to support fire safety in our community," Ramirez said, his voice filled with sincerity. "It's not easy to own up to one's mistakes, but you've shown true courage and commitment in doing so." As the applause echoed around them, Karen felt a tear of joy roll down her cheek. She knew that her journey was far from over, but in that moment, she felt a sense of peace and redemption that she had never thought possible. In the end, Karen's story serves as a powerful reminder that even the most entitled and privileged individuals can transform themselves, and that the path to redemption is one that requires humility, perseverance, and a genuine desire to make amends. It's a lesson that will continue to resonate with those who witness Karen's remarkable journey.